Thank you. Thank you so much for being here this morning. My name is Maria McRoberts, and I'm an art director with a background in photography and graphic design. I lead a team of amazing graphic designers, incredibly talented, who also happen to be super women in my mind. I tend to describe my team as a total powerhouse, and I'm really proud of the work that they do every day and helping my vision come to life. We work for a nonprofit called Think Education that partners with school districts to create conditions for success for every single student, no matter what the zip code is. As you heard, Ivan, the theme for this month is El Camino, which in Spanish translates to a few different things. It can be a path or a road or a street, but it also means a journey. And that is the meaning that I would like to focus on today. I want to share with you two of my caminos. One of the most challenging ones that I've ever been on, which is being an immigrant. And the other one that I go on a daily basis as an art director. You will see after this talk that I find quite a few overlaps between these two journeys. And I know that right now that sounds like a crazy idea, but I am living proof that you're wrong. I live at that intersection every day. And hopefully at the end of this talk, you will be able to see those overlaps clearly. But first, let's agree on the ingredients that make a journey. In its most basic form, it's made out of a point A and point B. And I'm sure that in your imagination, you also drew a line between those 2 points. And it doesn't matter what that line looks like. It could be a curve or a loop or a zigzag or a 6-point stroke, solid line. I'm sure overall that composition feels very linear. The other ingredient is time. How long does it take me, you, us, to go from point A to point B? When I was 17, I became fascinated by the philosophy of time, which examines if time is a mind-independent entity or a construct of human perception. There's scientific proof that time moves at different speeds, at different altitudes, for example. So time moves slower at sea level, where gravity is stronger, and faster at top of the mountain where gravity is weaker. That's not me trying to start a cult, that's science. There's absolutely very sophisticated clocks and devices that can measure this difference. And I like to think that maybe my head is older than my feet then, if that's the case. But that really opened the door to me thinking that time is really an elastic thing. And if I stir these ingredients, this point A and point B, and the time being flexible, then the way that I picture a journey is more like a rubber band. It has more of an organic shape that stretches or becomes smaller. And if you embrace that idea of a journey not being a line, but more like a circle, then you can see why I find overlaps between those journeys. I am a big fan of the Venn diagram. You will see it multiple times. So let's talk about the first overlap. I believe that every journey starts with an act of courage. And sometimes it's barely there. You don't even notice that you're being brave. And sometimes it's that kind of courage that makes you close your eyes and take a deep breath. In my case, it also starts with a tin of Altoids. When I was 24, I packed a bag with some t-shirts, pair of jeans, most of my CDs, and a tin of Altoids. Inside the tin of Altoids, I had a $20 bill, the keys to my house in Mexico City, and my lucky rock. That was my break in case of emergency plan. And I put it in this bag, and I took a plane, and I moved to California. And I left everyone and everything behind. My food, my language, my music, my culture, my friends, my family, everything was outside. I guess it's fair that you can say that I also packed a lot of hope into that bag. There were many times where I felt that I had done a terrible mistake. One of those nights was when I went to see a special screening of The Exorcist, which is one of my favorite movies, at a movie theater in Irvine, like on a Wednesday night. And when the movie ended, I walked out of the theater and there was no honking, no music, no smells, and 0 humans. And that felt like culture shock to me. I was very suddenly in a place that I didn't recognize as home. I also learned that people here are able to say goodbye to each other in less than 30 minutes. That doesn't happen in my culture. And then most of the times there's no hugging or kissing involved. We'll just say, okay, bye, and then just people start walking away from each other. Or also that it's not considered rude to write an invitation with an end time and say, my party is from 3 to 5. And at 5, you're expected to leave. In Mexico, it's not like that. You say, my party's at 3 and it ends when it ends. You have absolutely 0 control of that. But then I started learning like these differences that made me feel very lonely. Nowadays, my tin of Altoids experience is I am in a world where I have millions of conversations with people. Most of them are trying to find a solution to a problem. And many of those conversations end up in me having to convince them that there is intention and meaning behind everything that I do. I like to think of graphic designers more like strategists than artists. And I know that that sounds a little bit controversial, but a huge percent of the work that a designer creates is about solving a problem in a beautiful and creative way. That makes a powerful image. So every time I open the tin to get a mint, it's just a reminder that no matter what that challenge is, it's never going to be as difficult as leaving everyone and everything. And that I'm able to do this. Facing a challenge right in the face is one of my first overlaps. When you are an immigrant, it's like a permanent state of grief because you're always missing that part that made you for as long as you knew. Now let's talk about what comes next. The second overlap is the inner dialogue. When I moved here, I developed this practice of rehearsing possible scenarios of human interaction in my head. So I would walk to the grocery store rehearsing, okay, if the cashier says something about the weather, then my response should be, yes, another sunny day in California. Isn't this amazing? If they ask me how my day is going, then I can respond to in a certain way. And I would rehearse all of this possible dialogues while going through the aisles of the grocery store and realizing that here there's 153 options for toothpaste. And then I would just try to prepare myself to have these responses ready if I was prompted to. Keep in mind that my knowledge of English at the time came from translating Green Day lyrics with a Spanish English dictionary. So not a huge vocabulary, probably not very polite either. So I just kept rehearsing until I felt like I had a good arsenal of responses for those little moments of interaction with others. Now I have a lot of inner dialogue, but it sounds more like, what if I move this to the right a little bit? And then I'm going to lower it. And instead of black, I'm going to use this really deep, dark charcoal gray. I don't know why people think I can do this. I am an absolute failure. There's 5 million graphic designers that are way better than me. I don't know who decided to give me this position. I should have just become an accountant. And then I just start thinking, oh, maybe instead of this number being a number 1, I'm going to use the word, and then I can have a circle shape for the O and an N and an E, and it just goes and goes and goes and goes. It happens the same when I'm leading my team and we have all of these conversations. So it feels a lot like a constant negotiation between our vision and the white artboard in front of us through the tools. And ideally, at the end of this, what sometimes is a difficult battle and sometimes is an easy, flows naturally journey, you're in a comfortable place. And what I mean by comfortable is not that you have something that we have seen before or that is boring or not exciting or anything like that. What I mean by comfortable is that you already went through these discussions with yourself, and ideally you're at a point where you're able to define your design. And I often like to talk about those choices as design solutions to empower a little bit more. I'm never in a place where I say, well, this looks like this because I like it. It's always some meaning behind it. I like to inject a shot of pride on everything that I do. Now, the third overlap is judgment. I learned very early on that people can become very uncomfortable if they hear a foreign language spoken in public. I've had people ask me not to speak Spanish when I'm talking to my mom on the phone, for example. If I have an accent, most of the times people make a note to let me know that they can hear it. Like they're just very aware that there's a difference. They also sometimes will ask you to go back where you came from, or question the authenticity of my Mexican origin if I don't take Cinco de Mayo too seriously. When you're a designer and you create something to have a life on its own out in the universe, you get immediate judgment. And sometimes that is part of the process of getting proofs approved and rounds of revisions. And sometimes it's just one person, sometimes it's a board of directors. It goes through all of this process, and people will have automatic feedback about what you create. And a lot of the times it will be based on their own experience, but they also will have an opinion on why it took you that amount of time or why it feels easy when it should feel complicated. That is judgment, and usually judgment comes from being very uncomfortable to things that are different or new, and sometimes that's people, when we feel, sound, or look different. On the days when I first moved to California and I felt very overwhelmed by this judgment, I created this routine. I found a darkroom that was available to rent for like a day. You could get a pass. And it was 3 miles away from my apartment. So I would wake up in the morning, load a roll of film into a plastic camera, and take that 3-mile walk to the darkroom while shooting pictures on the way. And then I would go in there and develop that roll of film, print a contact sheet, make some enlargements, and then walk the 3 miles back home. Having that familiar space and feeling like I was in control of something gave me the energy to feel that I could take another day of being a stranger. Now, we've talked about the shape of these journeys for a little bit, and I want to revisit the idea of time. We all know that we live in the era of immediacy. We want our news in 5-second reels. I don't want to read. I just want to hear it and see a video. We want our packages delivered overnight. We have food handed over to us through the windows of our cars so you can just keep going. Coffee is usually to go. It's not like a moment that you create with friends. And then we pass other cars so we can be the first one at the red light. Why is that? I think it's worth that question. Why are we always in such a rush? Why are we always trying to be busy and productive and work as fast and as fast as you can all the time? I like to have a set of tools that I like to call my tempo changers. and is my record collection, which is growing slowly because I am obsessed with color vinyl. Those can be very expensive. My cassette tapes. I'm sure like most of you are very young, but there's a way where you can rewind a cassette tape if you put a pencil through one of the holes. That's the amount of effort it needs to go back to a song you really love. It's nothing compared to feeling a piece of glass against your skin to press play. It's a very different experience. My Polaroid cameras, there's 8 slides of film in a cartridge. Which means you can't just go around taking 5,000 selfies. You really have to think about it. You have to be very intentional about capturing this moment and freeze it for a long time. And, sorry. And the way that my records work is that I usually flip through the catalog, then I revisit the cover for the album, I turn it around, I remind myself why I bought that one until I see the track that I really like. And by the time you put the needle down, you went through this like little ritual that helps you ground and really enjoy the music instead of just pressing play again. My last tool that I consider a tempo changer is my electric guitar. I have a goldenrod Telecaster that is probably high up there with the love that I have for my kids. And it's just the best teacher that I've had about persistence and patience. Those guys make it look so easy. Like you see them, and it's painful. It's physically painful. Your fingers hurt until you get calluses, and nothing sounds great. But really, in this world of the art direction, there's this pursuit of perfection that the guitar allows me to escape. And it helps me quiet down these voices that are always demanding that we create more and more and more and more, and that it always should be absolutely perfect. In many cultures, life doesn't end when our bodies stop working. And this is another moment where points A and B feel like it can occupy the same moment in time. And that's kind of the door of why I see these journeys as a circle instead of a line. In my culture, we believe that hummingbirds are carriers of messages from the underworld to the land of the living. And it's a way for us to remind us that the souls of our ancestors are here to tell us that we're not alone, that we are still, or that they're still with us. When I think about my hummingbird, I think it's going to be like an origami shape made out of paper. And that all of the crevices and the creases that make the falls are all of these journeys and unpaved roads and streets and highways and dark alleyways that made us who we are. And I am very confident that this moment, sharing this, my experience with you, is for sure going to be one of those folds in my hummingbird. So thank you. Thank you for being here.